Welcome to the official podcast of the weekly messages from Bowie City Church. Bowie City Church is a non-denominational church in Bowie, Maryland, with a desire to see people become fully devoted followers of Jesus Christ. For more information, including gathering times and locations, please check out our website at www.bowiecitychurch.com.
Good morning. How we all doing this morning? You ever have a rough day? Yeah? You ever do it in front of 40 people? Welcome to church this morning. We are excited to be here, even though, you know what, things just don't go the way that you always plan them. And that's fine. Because today we're starting a new series about choices and about choosing. And today, actually since last night when I jumped into a conversation that Dione and Caleb were having about his back. He just had gone out, and we had been talking about this series. We've been talking about this week. We have been going back and forth about what we really believe God wanted to say and do. And then suddenly everything changed. Everything changed. And so we had a choice to make. And we've had multiple choices to make. And we arrived here this morning, and the plan that we had kind of set in place last night, we tried that, and that didn't work. And so we had another choice to make. And the choice that we didn't actually make and actually never considered was maybe we should just close the doors and go home. Because to be honest, for some of us this morning, that was like a thought that fleetingly went through, because it's just like one thing after another just kept not working. But I believe that we're here for a purpose. We're here for a reason. And so, you know, it doesn't matter whether the words come up with the video or don't. And they were supposed to, and they did before we had service, because we tested all of them. Stuff happens. This whole series, this whole month, this next 4 weeks of time that we're going to spend together is going to be about what we do when stuff happens. Because the title of this series is I Choose. I choose. And see, every day, every moment of the day, we have choices to make. And whether we like them or not, we have choices to make. For you this morning, you chose to get up and come here. Now, for some of you, it may not have been your choice precisely. Okay? My daughter's here this morning. But for others, it was. For some of you, you may have been the one who was like trying to get everybody else out of bed, into the car, let's go to church. Okay? You chose to be on time. The rest of your family didn't. That happens all the time. Happens all the time. We make choices every day. For some, this may be your first time here. You're like, well, I've seen the signs. I've seen about this church. Let's go try it out. Let's go see what's happening. You chose to come. You chose to join us this morning. And I'm glad that you did. I'm glad that you did. If for some reason you miss any part of this series, we're trying some new things. As you know, we record our messages every Sunday. We put them up on our website, and you can go to bowiecitychurch.com/media, and on there you can see all of the back catalog that we have of all our messages. If you weren't here last week, okay, you missed it, because last week, in fact, the last series, we did flannel graph. Okay, we did the whole, if you're expecting flannel graph this morning, there's no flannel graph. All right, I know you're all like, seriously? Can we do flannel graph again? No. After last week, after Dione made everything up with flannel graph people, it wasn't actually in the flannel graph book. Okay, he was just randomly cutting people out, and Jesus was playing Elijah at one point. It just, you know, we're not doing flannel graph for this series. We'll bring it back out because it is fun. It is fun to do. We'll bring it back out. But we're going to talk today. We're going to talk about choices. I don't know if you've noticed, but we're in a political race at the minute. We're in a presidential election. And you have a choice to make. All right? This is not politics. I'm not going to mention politics. If you look at the next slide, okay? You have a choice to make. The whole country has a choice to make. Whether you like it or not, you have a choice. You can either like the Redskins or you can like the Ravens. That's your choice. Okay? Liking the Steelers doesn't count. All right? liking the other two teams at this moment in time doesn't really count for much either. In doing a little bit of research on this and prepping for this series, I found out that we make, on average, and I don't know how they calculated this, but they calculated that we make roughly 35,000 choices a day. You're like, what? Yeah, 35,000 conscious choices are made per day by the average human being. Now, don't elbow the person beside you and go, you're way, way low. All right? But we constantly make choices. Okay, you get up in the morning and you decide what to wear. Well, first of all, you get up in the morning and you decide how many times to hit the snooze button. All right, that's my household. It's like, okay, another, no, it's not happening yet either. Let's just keep going here. All right, now I have to get up. You know, anybody have the emergency alarm? That when the emergency alarm goes up, then you really have to get out of bed? Yeah. Well, yeah, you sleep through anything. We constantly make choices. What am I going to wear? What do I have to do? How am I going to get there? I have to drive through D.C. to get to my office, and so every morning I make a choice as to how am I going to sit in traffic today? What surroundings do I want to look at? Choices, choices, choices. We're constantly making choices. Okay, if you're a couple, or you have been a couple, you've had this conversation, okay, where it doesn't matter who starts it. It always ends the same way. Hey, do you want to go out to eat tonight? Sure. Where'd you want to go? I don't mind. You pick. No, you pick. No, you pick. Okay, well, I want to go here. I don't want to go there. Sorry, what? You ever had that? Ever been there? Okay, well, then you pick. Well, I don't know where. I'll go anywhere. No, you won't, because I just suggested somewhere and you said no. I don't have that conversation anymore. I come home and I'll say, hey, Jules, do you want to go and eat here? And if she says yes or no, then that determines whether we go out or we stay in. Because it's just easier that way. Do you want to go and get some Chinese food? No, not tonight. Great. What's in the fridge? Or, yes, that sounds awesome. Get your coat. We're going. Just makes the choice easier. See, all the time we just have choices to make. We have choices, choices, choices. You know, I think that it's interesting when we think about this whole idea of choosing, is that the choice that you make, particularly in today's society, particularly with the advent and the sort of endless reach of things like social media, the choice that you make always upsets someone. Always upsets someone. Doesn't matter what it is. Okay, going out to dinner, if you have a family of 4 like we do, someone's always, I don't want to go there. Okay, it's bad enough me and Julie getting on the same page, and then you have 2 children. And it's like, well, are you paying? And nope, then you just get whatever you get. That's your choice. But in the adult world, okay, whenever we're talking with people, you just say something and it's instantly can be offensive. It's not meant to be offensive, but it can be offensive. And so we seem to be so delicately trying to balance our lives, balance the words that we say, balance the things that we say. We're constantly being bombarded. It is an election year. So we're getting all these messages coming through, and it's like, just if you watch them and go, okay, well, is that true? Is that true? Is that true? Is that true? And you get to the point where you just say, no, none of them's true. There's nothing that I've seen is true. Awesome. You still have to make a choice. See, over these next 4 weeks, what we're going to do is we're going to unpack live. We're going to unpack what it means to make a choice. Today, we want to talk about choosing Jesus, because that's the beginning of it all. We're going to move on over the next few weeks. We're going to talk about choosing life. We're going to talk about choosing love. We're going to talk about choosing joy. You see, as Christians, we have a different set of choices to make. As believers, we have a different set of choices to make than the rest of the world. And today, we're going to start off by that most essential and primary choice of choosing Jesus. You see, if you're like me, and I don't pretend that you're all like me, because that would be horrible, really would be horrible, and you'll uncover more of that as we go through this message. But I don't know about you, I like to control stuff. Anybody else like to control stuff? Don't put your hands up. Okay. You ever try to control things? All right, you try and just, okay, you keep the remote control? Yeah, have that? Okay, it's Sunday afternoon, it's football, sorry. And it's all the football games that are on all the stations. Right? That's just how it is. Okay. I'll come home from work some days early and Julie will be watching some HGTV stuff. And it's HGTV. It's all like, no. She's got control. This is what we're watching. Deal with it. Or go somewhere else. We like to control stuff. We struggle with that because we know that we don't want to be controlling people. You know, for many of us, we struggle with this. You know, when you first start dating, I'll change him. Oh, no, you won't. You've been married to him for 20 years. He still hasn't changed. You just keep getting frustrated on a regular basis. But we say things like that. I'll change this. I'll control this. That's not what God's asking us to do. In Proverbs 3, verse 5 to 6, it says this: trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to God, and he will make your paths straight. We struggle with verses like this. At least I do. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Now, I went to school, went to college. I teach in a college. When I look at myself, I think, I got a reasonable amount of understanding, God. Can I lean on it a little bit? And God says, no. You need to trust in me with all your heart. Don't lean on your understanding at all. Don't lean on your understanding of anything that you know. But trust in me. And that's so hard to do. In all your ways submit to God, and he will make your paths straight. See, we love that last bit. Can we just jump to the "and he will make your paths straight" bit? Can we live there? Because I would love to have a straight path. I would love, in all of the relationships that I have to deal with and all the situations I have to walk through, just to have a straight path where it's just go here all the time. I would love that. And God says, okay, you can have that. Just trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Give up control. Ooh, that's hard. You see, we want to control everything. But the more that we control things, the more fearful we get that we'll be out of control. It's kind of a weird thing. We want to control everything that we come into contact with. But the more we control stuff, the more fearful we get that it somehow will slip out of our hands. And the more fearful that we get about losing control, the more we try and control. There's this endless cycle that today I want us to break. Today I want us to say, you know what? I want to give up control. I want to give up this whole idea of controlling everything. Controlling the information that I get, controlling the information that I deliver, controlling the people that I engage with. I want to give that up. Turn with me to Genesis 16, verses 1 to 4. I want to tell a quick story here about control. In Genesis 16, way back in the beginning, we find a older couple called Abram and Sarai. Abram and Sarai, who were basically called by God and left their home and wandered to a place where God told them to stop. God came to them, and they were, at this point in time, around 80 years old or so. God came to them and said, I'm going to make you the father of nations. When you look at the stars, your descendants are going to be as multiple as the stars. Now, living in Bowie, that could be like 3. Because we have so much light pollution. When you look up, that's about all the stars you can see. Abram had no light pollution. When he stood in the middle of the desert and looked up, there was nothing to obstruct his view from horizon to horizon and all of the stars that he could see. I don't know if you've ever been out somewhere where there's no light pollution anywhere. And it's pitch black. And there's no moon. And you can see, you didn't even know there were that many stars. This is what God says to Abram. I'm going to make you the father of this many children. Abram's in his 80s. It's not happening. His wife's in her 80s and she's not getting pregnant. And so this is what they do. Now Sarah, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian maidservant named Hagar. So she said to Abram, "The Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my maidservant. Perhaps I can build a family through her." Abram agreed to what Sarai said. So after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarai, his wife, took her Egyptian maidservant Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar and she conceived. God spoke a word to Abram, and it didn't happen in Sarah's control. It didn't happen in the time that she had allotted that it should happen. Well, God said, so it should have happened here because that really fits my schedule. Lord, thank you for your word. If we could just pencil you in on Tuesday, that would be great. And so what she does is she takes control. She looks at her maidservant and says to her maidservant, "Hey, why don't you sleep with my husband and then you can have a son and we'll get the ball rolling. We'll start the whole sons as many as the stars thing." Out of Hagar came a son. His name was Ishmael. But Ishmael wasn't the promise that God had spoken of. See, God had a plan. When God speaks, God has a plan. God has timing, and God knows what he's doing. And we need to actually give up control and say, "Okay, God, we're going to follow you." You see, what God's plan was a little boy named Isaac. And it wasn't for another 14 years. 14 years before Isaac was born. Ishmael was there as a constant reminder. But 14 years later, Isaac was born. And when Isaac was born, he was the child of the promise. He was the child that God had promised Abram. But Abram now had 2 sons. And what came from those 2 sons has been a really interesting worldwide development. See, if you trace the lineage of Ishmael and you trace the lineage of Isaac, you have from Ishmael came the Arab nations, Muhammad, and Islam. And from Isaac came the Jewish nations, the lineage of Christ, Christianity. When Ishmael was born, Sarah kicked Hagar out and her son, started the combat, started the fighting. And that's been that way ever since. One decision to control the situation has led to thousands of years of conflict. Thousands of years of conflict. Our choices, how we choose, what we try and control is vitally important. See, I don't know about you, but for me, I try and control as much as I can control because I feel safe then. Try and control our finances, try and control my family, I try and control our safety, try and control our household. If we go back to Proverbs, God's not saying to control. God's saying to surrender. So what about you? What are you trying to control? What is it that you're trying to keep tightly in your control? What is it that God might be asking you to open up your hands and let go of? We live in a really interesting time. We live in a time when our society is struggling with this. Our society is struggling with our rights, our control, what we can control. And we are called to live in the world, but we're not called to be of the world. We're called to live in a different way. And the difficult thing for Christians, I think, at this time is that God is not calling us to take sides. God is calling us to take Christ. God is not calling us to choose this side or choose that side. God is calling us to choose Jesus and to choose what Jesus would do. And that road is hard because that road's misunderstood. In Joshua 24:15, right at the end of the book of Joshua, there's that very famous passage. And it says this, it says, "If serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve." And that line is, for me and my house, we will serve the Lord, comes up in there. What Joshua is saying to his people, they've just come into the promised land. It's a land that even says that they didn't have to till the land and it was bountiful. They didn't have to build the houses, they were there. They didn't have to work for it at all. It was there for them. And what the people decided was they were going to go and worship other gods. They were going to go back and do things that they shouldn't be doing. They were taking their eyes off of the Lord and putting them on these small gods. And Joshua has to call the people together and say, if serving the Lord is so undesirable to you, choose. Choose. Choose for yourselves this day who you will serve. See, that's hard. That's hard. That same choice faces us. And I hope that we will choose Jesus. I hope that every morning, our first choice in the morning is, Jesus, I'll choose to follow you. Jesus, I choose your way. I choose your path. I choose to do what you would do. I choose you because you are the Lord of lords and the King of kings. See, when you choose Jesus, you got to give up everything else. Oh, it's the hardest thing in the world. I wish people wouldn't sort of preach Christianity as being, hey, just come to Jesus. He'll take care of everything. I wish, really? That wasn't my experience. Walking the Christian life has not been all a bed of roses. I don't know about you. Maybe it's just me. But Jesus says a narrow way to get. And that's where I feel like we're walking sometimes. I want to encourage you. This is what God has called us to do. God has called us to choose Christ. And choosing Christ means we lay down everything else of our own. We give up all of our rights. Oh, that's hard. But I have a right to, no, you don't. Not when you follow Jesus. When you make Jesus Lord, you give up everything. But, there's no buts with Christ. There's no buts with choosing Jesus. Well, Jason, I hear what you're saying, but that's just so hard. I don't know if I can do that. Yeah, me neither. Me neither. You know why? Because it is hard. It is hard. But here's the thing. We're not doing this on our own. We're not living this life on our own. We're not walking this. We made a choice, said a prayer one day, okay, got a little Bible, and we went home and we tried to read it, and then that's it. That's not choosing Christ. Choosing Christ every day is waking up and saying, Jesus, what are you saying today? What do you want me to do today? Who do you want me to touch today? Who do you want me to bring life to today? And Jesus said this in John 16. He said, in this world, you're going to have trouble. Yep, amen. He got that one right. But take heart. Be encouraged. You're going to have trouble. Just accept it. You're going to be misunderstood. You're going to get laughed at in school. You're going to get made fun of. You might get passed over for promotion by somebody else who's not as good as you. Take heart. Because he then says, I have overcome the world. Jesus has overcome the world. Why do we choose Jesus? Because Jesus wins. Jump to the back of the book, Jesus wins. And it's not easy, but Jesus wins. See, following Jesus means that we choose to die to ourselves. In Galatians 2:20, Paul wrote this. He says, I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live. That's as clear as it can get. When you were crucified, when the Roman soldiers crucified people, they died. They never came back from that one. They were dead. And Paul says, I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, which means I've given up and laid down everything that I thought was mine. All of my rights, all of my wants, all of my desires, everything, I've laid it down. Because I'm no longer alive. Dead people don't want anything. They just don't. But Paul closes that verse by saying, but Christ lives in me. You see, dying to yourself is not that you just become dead and hollow and empty. Dying to yourself means that you get yourself out of the way and you allow Christ to live in you and through you. And what happens then is you begin to speak what Jesus would say. Why? Because you wake up in the morning and you say, God, what are you trying to say today? What are you doing today? And God gives you revelation. God opens your eyes. God gives you a verse in the middle of the day. You don't know where it came from. God puts a song on the radio that you hear and you're like, oh, wow, it sticks in your head. And later on, you're in a conversation with somebody. God gives you the opportunity to share that, to bring that, to deposit life, to give life. Why? Because you chose Jesus. Because you chose Jesus. Paul goes on later in that verse to say, the life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God. See, our lives should not be lived because of what we believe and what we know. Our lives should be lived because of the faith that we have in Jesus. Our lives should be lived as you plan for the rest of the day. Okay, the Redskins are playing today. Oh, dear Lord, help them. Talk about faith. 50-odd thousand people going down to that stadium, praying and believing that their team will win. That's some faith. Now, why are they going there? Because that's where the team is. They're coming together around the team. Well, what do we do as a church? Where is Jesus at? Where do we come together around Christ? Well, Christ is in you. So wherever you walk, wherever you go, tomorrow when you go to work, when you go to school, when you go to college, Jesus walks in you. When you choose Christ, you take him there. I've had interesting discussions with people about prayer in schools and Jesus in the schools and about Christian kids not going to public school, but going to church schools. And it's great. You can send your kid to whatever school you want to send your kid to. But I believe that whenever my children go to school and Christ is in them, it's the only way I can get Christ in that school, because that's where Jesus walks. And as they go in, my prayer is that they choose Jesus. My prayer is that they choose Christ. My prayer is that whenever, and it happened, my daughter came home and she's like, so we get to listen to music and math, and our teacher kind of puts on YouTube videos and stuff and sort of says, hey, anybody got any requests? And so my 12-year-old, I love her to bits, my 12-year-old said, hey, can you put Oceans by Hillsong on? Teacher's like, sure. Type it up, boom. 9 minutes of worship. It's the longest song in the world. 9 minutes of Jesus being glorified in a math class in middle school. The teacher was like, does this song ever end? Nah, I probably should have told you it doesn't. See, when we choose Jesus, and we walk with Jesus and we take Jesus where we go, then we have an impact on our surroundings. We don't control our surroundings. We just let Jesus loose in our surroundings. That's a whole lot more fun, because he does a whole lot more than we could ever do. We're not trying to manipulate people and to get them onto our side. We just let Jesus go. Get him, God. Woo. See, when Jesus walked around, stuff happened. People got healed. The blind could see. Deaf could hear. Lame people jumped up, grabbed their mat, and went home. Now, I don't know about you, but I work with some blind, deaf, and lame people. Not physically, spiritually. And there's nothing more that I would love to see than Jesus come and bring sight to the blind and let them ears be open so that they can hear the good news of the gospel of Christ. And for those who are struggling and limping through life, to have Jesus come and pick them up in his hand and carry them. See, when we choose Christ, that's what we choose. We choose something that's different. We choose something that's out of the normal. We choose something, we choose someone who can have an impact and transform society. But when we choose Jesus, we choose death. We choose death to ourselves. We choose death to our own desires. And I don't know about you, but I need to keep killing my own desires. It's been said that when there's a human sacrifice or a live sacrifice, the hardest thing is to keep it on the table because it keeps wanting to wriggle away. And that's what we want to do. We come to Sundays, we come to moments with Christ where it's like we get, yes, go for it, all excited, woo! And then Monday hits or Tuesday hits. And it's like, woo! By the time Thursday's there, it's like, whoa. But I don't want to live like that anymore. Because choosing Jesus, we choose death. Choosing Jesus means we choose to lay down control. And I want to choose to lay down control. I want to choose surrender. Choosing Jesus requires faith. Because choosing Jesus means we're going to step out and do things that we have no idea if it's going to work. And you know what? Yep, do it. Do it. When Peter got out of the boat, okay, no physics lessons required. No man had ever walked out of a fishing boat. Jesus said, come. Excuse me, Lord, but the laws of physics would actually suggest that I will sink. No physics required. Come. One word. Follow Jesus. Come. Peter gets out of the boat. Peter gets out of the boat, walks on water until he realizes that, oh, physics isn't working. Takes his eyes off Jesus, starts to sink. See, for you and for me, when we take our eyes off Christ, that's when we start to sink. And so every day, this is a daily commitment. This is a daily transformation where we're going to wake up in the morning and say, I choose you, Jesus. My first of my 35,000 decisions today is I choose Christ. Now what do you want me to do? Where do you want me to go? Choosing Jesus calls for repentance. You know what? You're going to mess up. I mess up all the time. You're going to mess up between the time you get out of bed and you make it to the bathroom. Because you're going to remember some idiot that you had to deal with yesterday that you're going to have to deal with today, and you're going to get all... We're going to mess up. But when we choose Christ, we choose repentance. God, change my heart on that situation. God, give me clarity on that. Lord, help me to see that person different. Give me wisdom as to how to speak to that person. Give me patience with that group. In David Platt's book, he asks these questions. Do we really believe that Jesus is worth abandoning everything for? Because if the answer is no, then we'll just continue to live as we live. But if we really believe that Jesus is worth abandoning everything for, then your life will look so much different. Do we really believe that Jesus is so good, so satisfying, and so rewarding that we will leave all we have and all we own and all we are in order to find our fullness in him? So we need to wrestle with that. Do I really believe that Jesus is everything? That he is my everything? See, when we get to that point, and that's a struggle, but when we get to that point, when you get to that point, say, that's it, God, yes, I believe that, then you start to live a whole lot differently. You let go control. Because your trust then is, okay, God, I'm going to put my trust in you, and I'm going to do whatever you say to do, and whoa, we're going to hang on for the ride. But what happens? God begins to show up, and God begins to show off. Do we believe enough in him to obey him and to follow him wherever he leads? Do we believe in him enough to obey and follow? See, this message isn't easy because choosing Christ isn't easy. So I don't want to preach a message where it's just about, hey, just come to Jesus, gentle Jesus, meek and mild, everything will be fine and dandy. Because you know what? It's not. It's not going to be. It's going to be exciting. I'll tell you that much. But it's not always just going to be, oh, nice and easy, nice and simple. Oh, look, everything's taken care of. See, when we choose Christ and we step out into what God has called us to, God's going to call us to things that are bigger than what we have. God's going to call us to step out and to try things that are bigger than we can resource. God's going to call us to step out and to reach for something that only He can provide. The most awesome thing in the world, though, is when you do that and Jesus comes through. See, when you do that, when you step out and Jesus comes through, it's like, whoa. That's when you tell everybody. That's when you're like, did you, what? Where do you hear what happened? It's like when Jesus was praying for people, and He would often say to them, don't tell anybody. Shh, shh, don't say a word. And what happened? They all ignored Him. Went and told everybody. Why? Because an encounter with the living Christ changes us so much so that we can't keep it inside. We can't just go in and go, oh, can't say. Weren't you blind? Yeah, but you're driving. I know, but I can't tell you. Jesus said, don't tell you. See, an encounter with Christ changes us. Weren't you always so grumpy and mean? Yep. What happened? Hey, you're smiling. What changed? What's going on? See, an encounter with Christ shows that there's something different. When I was a student, I'll close with this story. We're going to take communion this morning. When I was a student, I had a patient, and I was a student PT. I'm a physical therapist. And I was talking to a patient. She was a 75, 76-year-old lady, and she had been diagnosed with cancer around her stomach. And they were going to operate to see what could be done. And as PTs, we work on the outside of the body. We never work on the inside. Okay, if your patient is bleeding, that's not our responsibility. We just work with bones and muscles and joints. And I was talking to this lady before her surgery because I was going to work with her after her surgery to get her breathing and everything back up and get her ready to go back out to live at home again. And just chatted with her, understood who she was. And the next day was her surgery. And I came in the next day, and my supervisor at the time said, hey, why don't you go into the surgery and just watch what they do? Okay, so I went in to watch. So I'm standing back there, and if you've ever seen, like even on TV, the operating tables and stuff, there's always this sterile field, okay? And you don't touch, unless you've been scrubbed to death, you don't touch anything that's in there. Well, I'm in there, and the doctor who's doing the surgery had a little run-in with his medical students who didn't even know the patient's name, and he threw them out of the theater and told them to go and study. And he looked at me and started grilling me, asking me questions. So I was like, this is the patient, because I just talked to her. So I gave him, he said, okay, go scrub up. I'm sorry, what? Go scrub up. And thankfully, I knew one of the nurses, so she grabbed me, pulled me in. She's like, okay, I'll help you. So I come out, gloves on. I'm now allowed inside the sterile field. So I'm like, okay. He said, don't touch anything outside of this, but you can touch anything inside. So I'm like, I ain't touching anything. I'm going to stand like this and hope I don't faint. And he opened up the patient. And he went, oh. So I'm like, over my mask. It's all eye signals. And he said, oh, that's not good. He said, give me your hand. I say, what? Give me your hand. So I put my hand into this woman's side, right about here. He said, do you feel that? And he went, oh, typical PT, like just no shame. You're just right in there. I'm up to the elbow. So I put my hand around this tumor that basically circled around the esophagus, which is the tube that goes from the throat down into the stomach. He said, do you feel that mass? I said, yeah. He said, do you feel the way it's the whole way around? I said, yeah. He said, we can't do anything about that. I was like, really? He said, yeah, we can't. Because of where it is, we can't do anything for this patient. So I left, went home, thought, that was pretty cool. It's pretty interesting. Went into work the next day. Patient's in post-op. And she stops me and she says, you were in my operation yesterday. I'm like, don't they have drugs for that? I mean, aren't you like anesthetic? And she said, you were in my operation yesterday. I said, yeah, how did you know? She said, well, in my operation, when they put me out, I had a dream. And I saw two people. One was Christ and one was you. And Jesus said it's going to be okay. They can't take the tumor out. And I just stood and looked at her, and just tears began to fill my eyes. I said, has anybody talked to you today? She said, you're the first person to come to my bed. And I said, well, Jesus was right. She said, it's okay. Jesus said it's going to be fine. And I just sat on her bed, and we prayed, and I cried, and she cried. And I thought, Jesus, you are so awesome that even in the midst of an operation that I was not supposed to be in, an operation I'm definitely not supposed to have my hand inside someone's body holding onto their tumor. That doesn't happen. But Jesus, you used that to tell her that you love her. See, I don't know what God's going to use for you, but Jesus stands in front of us today, and he has a choice. And the choice is, are you going to choose to surrender and choose Jesus, or are you just going to choose to control? Let's pray.